You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. Today's episode is brought to you by the Richmond Retail and E-commerce Directors Forum. The event is taking place on April 30th at the Belfry in Sutton Coldfield. If you are a regular listener of the podcast, you'll know that I've been working with the brilliant team at Richmond Events to bring you these conversations with retail leaders. Just last week, I spoke to Hash Latta, who is now the former CEO of Jigsaw. He came on the podcast and we talked about the resurgence of accessible luxury and so much more. We talked about tariffs, returns, self-checkouts, and fashion stores. It was a really fascinating and wide-ranging conversation. Hash is going to be speaking about leadership at the Richmond event. So I would firstly encourage you to go back and listen to or watch the conversation with Hash because it is also available on YouTube, as is today's episode. And I would also encourage you, if you are a retailer, to register for the event in April. We do have a few retail spaces available. You can register via the link, which I will include in the show notes, or you can send me an email, natalie@retaildisrupted.com, and I will do my best to get you booked in. Okay, on to today's guest. I am delighted to welcome eBay's Global GM of Fashion, Kirsty Keegan, to the podcast. Kirsty is responsible for eBay's global fashion business. She joined eBay in 2011 and has led a number of initiatives, including the launch of free fashion selling, the pivotal pre-loved fashion partnership with Love Island, and the successful launch of the Authenticity Guarantee in the UK. She's also been leading the charge in repositioning eBay as a destination for buying and selling authentic high-end items. Kirsty has been recognized in Retail Week's Future Leaders list, as well as the Tech list. Kirsty is an eBay seller herself, having joined the platform in 2007. Prior to joining eBay, Kirsty had a decade-long career working at some of the UK's biggest fashion brands, including Arcadia Group, M&S, TK Maxx, and Brand Alley. Kirsty is mother to 2 fashion-obsessed kids and loves to shop herself, investing in a mix of new and pre-loved classic pieces. Kirsty, welcome to Retail Disrupted. I am really excited to have you here today, and also that you're going to be joining us at the Richmond event next month. So we have lots to talk about. But first, let's start out with some intros. Can you tell us more about yourself and your role at eBay?
Oh, nice to be here, Natalie. So I work at eBay and I run our global fashion team at eBay, and I've been at eBay 14 years, so quite a long time. Been through lots of change, which is exciting. And my job really is to think about the customer proposition for, from our buyers and sellers, what our experience looks like, how we shop externally. So it's the sort of the full end-to-end fashion proposition for eBay and how the fashion proposition fits in with everything else that we do at eBay as well.
Yeah, so tell us more about the fashion category at eBay. How important is it? Who are your core customers? And what are they looking for when buying clothes on eBay?
So fashion actually is a really big category for us at eBay. It's one of those categories that sellers first sell in or first buy in. I think often it's because people, buy clothes quite regularly. And also it's a category where, you're clearing out your wardrobe, or, you'll grow out of something, your style changes. So often it's a category where you're often changing things. And so that's why it's a really important category for eBay. And when we look at what we focus on, actually, because it's so huge, the bit that we really focus on is our pre-loved branded inventory. And that comes across from anything from clothing, shoes and accessories. And then we have very specific propositions for our more luxury goods. So sneakers, watches, jewelry, handbags, because we have to provide different services for customers that buy luxury goods on eBay. So we have to really think about the needs depending on you're buying or selling a £5 or £10 item versus a £5,000 item.
Yeah. So maybe we can get into that in a little bit more detail, because I imagine the luxury shopper is I mean, obviously, they're coming to eBay to look for good value. I guess if they're buying secondhand, but then I imagine authenticity is probably really important as well. So maybe you could talk to what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've been around, it's nearly 30 years. So we are always having to innovate and evolve and adapt. And people have long come to eBay to look for items that where they want to get great value, or it's because they can't find them elsewhere. And there was a trend where a lot of luxury items you can't just walk into a store and buy them. So a lot of people will come to eBay to find those. But we did some research with customers, and despite us being, having loads and loads of inventory of these, some customers were a little bit scared to actually make that purchase because they want to know, is that item genuine, and have you got my back in case something goes wrong? Because it's a lot of money for people to spend. And so we introduced an authenticity guarantee program a few years ago, and that is now live in all of our major markets. So it means that when you buy a luxury pair of sneakers or handbag or watch, that item will be sent directly to our authentication center. And that's free of charge over a certain price point. We'll check, is that the item that you thought it was? You've listed a brown item, but you've sent me a black item, right? So we let the customer know. And then we also check for its authenticity. That then goes on to the buyer, and we let them know it's an authentic item. And if they receive that item and they just change their mind and wanted to send it back, the great thing for sellers is the item goes back through the authentication center. And so, trust is so important for us. And that's the one thing we really strive to be, whether you're buying a really low ASP item or a high ASP item, trust is important. And that's also why we have our eBay money back guarantee as well. So you might not be buying a really expensive item, but if something goes wrong, essentially it means we step in and we've got your back.
Yeah, and that trust is important both for sellers and for buyers, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. On the topic of buyers, on the topic of consumers, I'd love to get your thoughts on how perception of pre-loved has evolved. And I think even the fact that we're using the word pre-loved today, along with pre-owned and secondhand, but the word pre-loved, I think, shows just how much of a shift has taken place in the consumer's mind. And to me, it feels like almost this perfect storm where shoppers are looking for affordability. So some people buying secondhand because they have to, but even if they don't have to, everybody wants value for money. And it's, I think, with the democratization of tech and all of that, making it more accessible is certainly, and the digitization of secondhand, I think, has been really interesting. But also, shoppers care about the planet. They know that buying new isn't great. And also, I think the third thing here is that shoppers want more individuality in their wardrobes, and they enjoy the thrill of a
Mhm.
find. They enjoy the thrill of a bargain because, the high street can be a little bit homogenous at times. So I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of different factors. Would you agree with this, Kirsty? What are you seeing at eBay?
People can buy and sell pre-loved goods for years and years and years, and that's essentially why eBay started all that time ago. But there were it was COVID times roughly when people started to, there was a lot of people couldn't get goods, and then people started to really think about their consumption. Um, and that was in a point where there was started to be more legislation being talked about in industry about, extended producer rights, digital product passports. And so there were a lot of brands coming to us saying, there's a lot more talk about sustainability. And then if you look at the YouGov polls in the UK, sustainability and making sure that we don't have global warming also become one of the most important things on customers' minds. However, what we were finding was there was sort of this sort of say-do gap where customers knew that it was important, but they were like, well, I'm not sure I want to buy something secondhand. Is it okay? Is it cool? Is it not? How will that item be when it arrives? And so actually, mostly it was about the perception of buying secondhand. And so that was why some of the partnerships that we've done to really try to change people's perceptions about buying secondhand and selling secondhand were our partnerships with Love Island, for example. And I think that was hopefully it feels like a real market shift where people thought, do you know what, it actually looks really cool. People are wearing it and you wouldn't know. And that was the bit that we were so pleased that the feedback came through that you wouldn't know that people are wearing secondhand items. And so we've done lots of work like that where we've, brought products in real life for people to see that you can see it's great value. And actually, sometimes it's nice that it's got a bit of a story. We have a community. You can buy a designer handbag, and you can exchange in a conversation with that seller, and they can tell you, it might have been their first handbag, or they've well looked after it, and it feels really nice. You're getting something unique and individual and personal to you. We see that in the searches that we get for vintage, the searches that we get for pre-loved, they're in the double digit increases year on year. And so actually, as much as all the work that we're doing hopefully is encouraging more and more people to think pre-loved first.
Yeah, and something that you guys did last year was probably helped with that as well, because you made a pretty bold decision to scrap fees for private sellers, which was so interesting. Can you tell us more about it? What inspired you to make that change, and how has it impacted the business?
Yeah. I mean, look, one of the biggest barriers that we heard from customers is I don't want to pay to sell my stuff. I want all the money. And when they sell that item. And so that was why we made the decision to remove fees. It's also the way that the market is going, right? So, we'll face into the fact there are lots of other competitors that are coming in with different models. And I think then it becomes really difficult. You have to make the customer make they have to make the decision about where they sell, where they buy. Is it going to be the best value? Am I paying the best fees? So we wanted to just try and make it as easy as possible for people to come and sell their items rather than put them in landfill or throw them away. And that's why we removed fees. And, we've seen a real increase in our listings, which is exactly what we wanted. And so there's more inventory for more people to come and buy. So we're super pleased about the outcome of that as well.
And that's so important for a marketplace model, isn't it? To have that assortment to encourage more buyers to the platform, and then you get that kind of flywheel effect. Um,
Yeah, we did quite a lot of other things. So we went free and we changed lots of other things on the site, because I think there's free and then there's easy is the other one. So that's where we've used things like AI actually to make it much easier for you to list an item. Like technology is amazing, right? You can take a picture, you can clean up the image and make it look like so you don't see all the stuff in the background. And it fills in some of the attributes for you. It helps you recommend a price, select a shipping option. And so that's where we've been using technology to do that. And then using that technology to help buyers find the stuff, because it's great. We have got millions and millions of listings. However, that can be really difficult when you are faced with that and you're trying to find something. So, helping make those recommendations, being more personalized to, what you're looking for. Natalie, you'll have a different feed to what I'm looking for. And so hopefully that we're showing the most appropriate products for you.
Yeah, yeah, and customers expect that today,
Yeah,
don't they? Especially,
absolutely.
the next generation of shoppers coming through. I mean, that's how they're growing up. They're digitally native generations, and they're expecting that kind of hyper personalization. So, um, you mentioned competitors, and I wanted to bring this up anyway. So I'm glad you did, because we have seen the emergence of new disruptors in the pre-love space, but also a lot of legacy retailers, a lot of high street retailers are now offering their own resale platforms. And I recently had Steve Preston on the podcast. He's the CEO of Goodwill in the US. And we talked all about secondhand and resale. And something he said stuck with me. And I just want to get your take on it, because he said that a rising tide lifts all boats. So lots of competition in this space, but everyone plays a slightly different role. Some are more digital, some are more consumer to consumer, some might be more high end. But the point is that it takes scale to drive change, to really shed that stigma, as you mentioned earlier, and normalize secondhand shopping. So I'd love to get your take on this, Kirsty. What are your thoughts on the competitive landscape and how that's evolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, I couldn't agree more, right, with what he said. And I think when I look back to the olden days when people were like, should we embrace and be online? Should we have a website? And I think interestingly, the brands that embraced that early on were much better set up for success in the future. And I think this is exactly where we're at now in re-commerce times. And I think the most important thing is having a re-commerce strategy and working out how that fits in with your brand. And that's the most important thing. And I would just say, like, I speak to brands all the time about unsure about what they should or shouldn't do, and what's the business case. And you've just got to think about it differently, embrace it, and do what works for your brand. And then I also think, from a consumer perspective, we've been around a long time. We've had lots of competitors that enter the market in all different categories. Actually, the more competitors there is, then it means it pushes for all of us to improve and make it a better shopping experience, so that more people are buying and selling stuff in marketplaces rather than putting stuff in the bin.
Yeah. Yeah. So important, that collective effort. On the topic of high street competitors, if we look outside of fashion for a minute and just look at sort of the evolution of the marketplace, we have seen just in the past few years, I'd say, a lot of high street retailers moving into marketplaces.
Mhm.
Retailers that I've spoken to have said, look, marketplaces are the new e-commerce. And I wonder what you think about this, as one of the original marketplaces out there. What is so attractive about the marketplace model today? What is it that's encouraging these legacy retailers to move into that space?
I mean, look, it's really, really tough. A really, really tough retail environment at the moment. And I think brands and retailers are looking for growth opportunities. And mostly they're going to have to come out of, their core models. And so that might be doing something, taking part in e-commerce and thinking about how that fits in with their strategy, or opening more stores, or it could be, as I said, opening a marketplace. Look, ultimately, I think that it's good for customers if you can provide more choice. I think there is a balance with providing more choice and then overwhelming your customers with too much choice, about where they should buy something, where they shouldn't buy something. And what I would say is the brands that I've seen over the years be really successful are the ones that have really stuck to their core beliefs and their core values and their sort of like core proposition in terms of the products that they are able to serve for a customer. And so I think that I understand why lots of people are doing it. Some people have been more successful than others, right? And so I think we'll have to see how whether there's some consolidation that happens in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you mentioned AI earlier, and I think AI plays a role here as well, because I've heard from retailers moving into this space that thanks to AI, for all the reasons that you listed, automating the process, getting those products listed quickly, they're able to quickly scale their marketplace offering. But I guess, to your point, whether or not, they can do it in a successful and sustainable way is yet to be seen. I'd like to ask you about the customer experience and how you tackle some of those perennial pain points. So if we just go back to fashion for a moment, and I know your business model is unique,
Mhm.
returns, for example, something that's been plaguing the fashion industry for years, buying 6 pairs of jeans and returning 5, that whole buy to try mentality.
Mhm.
Clearly, probably less of an issue for you guys, but I wonder, what are some of the pain points that an eBay shopper or a marketplace shopper more generally might encounter, and how do you tackle them?
Yeah. I mean, so we talked about trust, right? Like that's one of the number one things. So, and we talked about some of the things that we've done there. There are some customers that are also not really ready to also want to sell themselves, and that's why we introduced things like consignment. So if you're selling a luxury item, you can send that item to someone, and they'll do all the work for you. And that really takes the lift out of doing things like that. And then the other thing, like you said, AI is really important. I just think we've invested in things like our shop the look. We've created a fashion page that is really personalized, so that you can come and have an an experience where you can browse through everything. But of the millions and millions of items, we try to show you the ones that might feel most relevant to you based on your shopping behavior. Um, and I think that's the bit that's important, is just making it a really simple and easy shopping experience. And I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Make it really easy for you to sell your stuff and make it really easy for people to find it.
So, Kirsty, looking ahead to the future, secondhand shopping is very much a growth area, of course. But I'd love to get your take on what else can be done to help drive adoption or even improve the experience for customers? So you talked about AI, but also, there's been a lot of innovation with things like virtual sizing tech, for example. And then you also talked about digital product passports, which I think is going to be really interesting. That legislation is coming into effect by 2030 for textiles across the EU. And I just wonder, will this encourage shoppers to make more sustainable choices and therefore fuel demand for secondhand?
Yeah, look, hopefully it will fuel both brands and retailers that are producing goods, and also provide more sort of like visibility and awareness for consumers. So we talked earlier about that gap between, I want to make more of a sustainable choice, but I'm not really sure what that means. And even the words like pre-loved and used and re-commerce, like sometimes people don't know if they're really like making a better decision or not. And even I've had to question some of that myself, right? And so I think the great thing about some of the legislation that is going to come through, and I hate for us to legislate because, as I say, but to get change, but sometimes that's what needs to be done. But I think digital passports are going to be a great tool for providing more visibility to the end consumer about where the item has come from. But also, I think what's interesting is if the brands that we've been discussing digital product passports with, because we acquired a company called Certilogo that provides these, but they also provide authentication services. And what's great is the brands that are looking to say, how can I take what is a legislation type topic and think about how I engage with the customer? And what's great about the digital product passports is you can scan that to find out where the item has come from, but you can then engage with the brand. You can find, like, could it be repair? Could it be resale solutions? And all of a sudden it becomes another vehicle a digital vehicle in which you as a brand or retailer can have a conversation with your, not a direct conversation, but conversation with customers that actually might not have ever come and shopped from you before. So that's what I think is so interesting about that technology, because I could have brought that item on eBay and now I'm scanning that tag and all of a sudden I'm engaged back with that brand and I might buy or repair through that brand. So that's what I think is super exciting about the landscape and the amazing technology that's coming through.
Yeah, that's interesting because I noticed recently Victoria's Secret, they launched their first digital product passports. And in addition to all of the, the traceability that comes with it, they're also introducing a feature that allows consumers to quickly reorder products. So again, it's like, how do you merge the customer experience and the ease and the frictionless aspects of shopping that we talked about earlier? How do you merge that with also at the same time giving consumers a lot more visibility when it comes to sustainability, which we're so desperately lacking at the moment? So really interesting stuff. Kirsty, it's been so wonderful to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.